Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SHOT Show 2026. This is 2A News with Craig DeLuz. We're here in Las Vegas, Nevada at SHOT Show 2026. Having a good time talking to folks throughout the industry. Ran into an old friend, but also a new friend and someone who is doing big things in the firearms community. Let's welcome to the program, Sarah Joy.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. All right, so tell us a little bit about Hold My Guns.
So Hold My Guns is a 501c3 nonprofit in the firearms community, and we partner with FFLs across the United States to provide voluntary firearms storage in times of need, no questions asked. So since we started in 2018, we've stored over 450 firearms, and we've distributed over 32,000 personal safety plans and trained probably 500 members of our firearms community in suicide prevention. So we really love our community and love liberty, and it's just a joy to be able to support our community.
How did you come up with this idea?
Well, I'm a range safety officer, and I have 5 kids who we're all in shooting sports. They are grown up now, but we lost an 18-year-old friend to suicide by firearm. And what I realized was that although the advice is to remove firearms from the home if someone is struggling with mental health, that unfortunately there are a lot of legal barriers to that. And so in our state, Pennsylvania, it is considered a felony transfer if you give your pistol to a friend to hold if they don't have a concealed carry permit. And what I realized was that while there's well-intentioned advice, you don't want to make people felons just because they're trying to do the right thing. And so I set out to solve that. And what I realized was that even if someone has someone who is in their lives who are lawfully able to hold on to a firearm temporarily for them, that not everyone, we take for granted that not everybody actually has a person in their life that they can trust to do that. And there's a lot at stake too, especially for those who are first responders or veterans who might need storage. And so privacy is of concern and things like that. And so I set out to partner with FFLs because it is a trusted resource in our community. It's our local gun shop is where we hang out and hit the range and go to different events and support things, within our local community. And so it really is an ideal place. Our firearms are investments, and we know that a trusted FFL is going to treat those firearms like they were their own, and they're not going to come back scratched and damaged and things like that.
So let's say someone generally, they're like, or they either are or they know someone who's in crisis, and, What's the process? What do? They come across your website, then what?
You would go to holdmyguns.org, and we have a list of our FFL partners. We currently have 7 partners, and find one that's near you. But if there is not one near you, then let me know, and we can help to connect you with other pathways to find an FFL that can offer storage. What the customer would do is then make an appointment, and they would go through the firearms, either want this is what I like to have stored. And just like when you're maybe renting a rental car or something like that, you go over it and the FFL is going to say, all right, I see a little scratch here. I'm just making a note. You make sure that your firearms are coming back in the same condition, if not better, than when you're bringing them in. There's a storage contract that's filled out that shows I am the lawful owner of these firearms. It's a business agreement, and those firearms are stored as long as are needed. And then when that customer decides I would like to bring these firearms back into my home, then they make an appointment and pick up their firearms. We have 2 different options for that. The first is behind the counter type storage, so it actually goes into the inventory of the FFL. And then we are moving forward with locker storage so that a gun owner can rent space and they can hold their firearms in a locker, and they would hold on to the key for that, so no transfers needed. So there's a couple different options with that, as well as they can store a non-serialized critical part, which again, there's no background check needed for that.
What you're doing is vital, because I think that, there are many, as you said, people who are either in law enforcement or people just who are in the gun rights community, people who don't want to lose their rights because they have a challenge that they're dealing with.
Yes.
But they also want to be responsible.
Exactly.
This allows them to not put their rights at risk, while at the same time doing the responsible thing.
Yes. I actually have a great example of that. So we had a gentleman who was in the middle of a very difficult, volatile divorce, and his ex-wife had actually asserted that he was a violent person, and yet he had no history of violence. And he met with his attorney, and the attorney said, you know, she's claiming that you have firearms. He said, I do. And so he said, if you can store your firearms and demonstrate to the court that you are acting responsibly, even facing this difficult situation, then we can present that as evidence of your clarity of thought despite these circumstances. And that's exactly what happened. And Craig, he had a young daughter that he hadn't seen since she was born. She was 18 months old. And the judge said, this gentleman has showed utmost care to make sure that his environment is safe. And he actually awarded joint custody when he hadn't seen his daughter for 18 months. He awarded joint custody, and the key was that he was able to demonstrate that I am of sound mind and I have voluntarily stored my firearms. So it's not just preserving gun rights, it's also taking into consideration things like custody and other aspects of life, that this really helps as a supportive resource.
And that's the thing, folks, is and we talk about this all the time. It's because you want to exercise your right to keep and bear arms, your other rights become suspect in many people's eyes. They really do. Your rights, your parental rights become suspect. Your free speech rights become suspect. Your rights against unreasonable search and seizure, it all becomes suspect. I mean, this to me is the real alternative to red flag laws, right?
Yes, I'm glad you see that.
Like places like Pennsylvania and California, I can't just give my guns to somebody, even if they have a concealed carry permit, unless they have an FFL. I can't just give them to somebody, because if I do, that's considered loaning. They got to go through a background check.
Yes. Just a point of clarification: in Pennsylvania, you can if you have a concealed carry permit, but there's still some obstacles even with that, and we always want to make sure that it's really our joy to equip our community to make responsible and life-affirming choices. But it's important that we be thinking about it like that. It's one thing just to say, well, be responsible, but if there's not a viable pathway for someone to do that, then it can actually be really hurtful and insulting and aloof to tell someone that in the middle of difficult circumstances. And that's where we come in.
What gets me is sometimes I think some of the advice that non-gun owner, I want to say non-gun owner, people who don't understand firearms really well, a firearms community, like they want to give you advice. Well, store your firearms separate from the ammunition. All right. Once again, what do you think of that advice?
Well, I love DC versus Heller 2008 that affirmed that we have the right to store our firearms in a way that they're accessible for self-defense. And I actually really admire and always enjoy talking with Dick Heller, and he's just done a phenomenal job to champion our rights. And we always apply that whenever we think about voluntary firearms storage or how we safely store firearms in the home. And there actually may be circumstances where a gun owner makes a decision for safety reasons, because we have to practice situational awareness everywhere, and even in our own home. We don't want our own home to be a blind spot, right? So applying that principle of situational awareness, if we have young toddlers in the home, we're not going to leave a firearm that's within their reach that is loaded, especially, right? So practicing situational awareness and applying it to the situation voluntarily is very, very different than trying to enforce a legislative approach where you can't have firearms out and about at all. We want to always respect that right to bear arms, the right to self-defense, and then allow gun owners the option of how they want to apply that in their lives. So what do I think about it? I think that absolutely we have to be able to have access to our firearms, and we also have to be very situationally aware about who has access to our firearms and make sure that we're finding what works for our family that is exercising those rights in a responsible way.
So now, do you have a standard or a process that you go through for approving an FFL?
Yes. So we want to work with FFLs who have excellent customer service ratings. I would never want to send someone, I like to think about people and not just numbers. I would never want to send someone like my dad, who's a Vietnam veteran, if he ever wanted to store firearms. I would never want to send someone like my dad to a gun shop that has low customer service ratings that would treat him awfully. I always want for people to be treated with dignity and respect. So having excellent customer service ratings, they need to have obviously a place for firearm storage. They need to be in good standing and compliance so that we're not referring people to an FFL that is going to end up causing trouble. So we look into all of those things and we vet our storage partners. The other thing that we really love is when they have classroom space and that they're open to doing community events, not just to bring awareness to the mission of Hold My Guns, but to really come alongside and help to support the community as a whole. Because when you think about, going through difficult times and maybe even leaning into suicide prevention a little bit, the goal is not just simply stay alive. It is how can we help people want to wake up tomorrow. And as we work through our FFL partners and we help to create opportunities to go do things together shoulder to shoulder in the community, like let's say, let's go clean up a park, right? And let's put up a sign-up sheet at our gun shop. Then people who might not normally go to counseling or people who might not normally get out and do things, they might say, you know what, my local gun shop, we're going to go together. We're going to go clean up this park so that the kids in our community have a safe place to play. And then we're going to go to the range together. We get free range time if we go do this. That kind of thing would get someone out of their house and have fun and build community and want to wake up the next day. So it's so important to be purposeful as we select FFLs who are in alignment with that kind of mission.
Now, are you required to have a brick and mortar? Because it's been particular in rural communities, a lot of times the FFL doesn't have a brick and mortar store.
We do have an FFL partner in Washington State who is a home-based FFL, but they have an excellent reputation. So we're willing to work with home-based FFLs. And to your point, many times in rural areas, there's not a brick and mortar FFL, but we would go through with them and make sure that they have the right, that they have storage, an area for storage, and that they're in good standing even though they're home-based. We also think about things like, security for a home-based FFL as well. If we want to make sure that those firearms are going to stay safe. So I'll probably ask them some questions like that too.
Excellent. Well, we already know your website, holdmyguns.org.
Yes.
Do you guys have .org.com?
No, we just have .org.
Okay, well, org.org, folks.
Yes.
Really appreciate what you're doing. And it is, when people talk about like, oh, well, how would you address the issue of whether it's, suicide by firearm or all of that? People always want to come up with a governmental solution, right? They always want the government to come up with a fix. And in my experience, in both in the gun industry and outside of the firearms community or issue, it's the people who care who generally tend to come up with the best solutions. This is a great example. It would be really, really good. Would love to hear about you working with more FFLs. If this here gets out to anybody, one, I hope it gets out to people who are in need, who are in crisis, or know someone in need and in crisis, and maybe needs to, temporarily have someone hold their firearms. That's number one. Number two, FFLs, so that when that person does call, would love to know that there are FFLs available. By the way, now is going to go to my next question. Do you have examples of, say, you got a call from someone, there wasn't an FFL in that area, and you actually found an FFL in that area? How receptive were they? And are they someone that you're working with, that you're still working with, you still work with?
Yes. So we have had calls from people in areas where there's not an FFL, and I will Again, we really care about our community. So I will do the legwork and find an FFL, walk them through the process. The cool thing is that back in the day when this idea was coming to fruition, our attorney, Joshua Prince, met with the ATF and said, hey, there's no right now lawful process for FFLs to store firearms, and there's really a need. And so in 2023, the ATF sent out a letter to all FFLs and said, and it's truly based on what they had shared with us in the early days, here's the process for storing firearms. And so FFLs that are interested, or who we call, even if they're not already a partner, they can look at those compliance components and say, hey, actually, if the ATF is okay with this and we're following this process, then we want to be able to help out. So we've done the heavy lifting, and now we're seeing the fruit of that, where FFLs, even if they're not necessarily a Hold My Guns partner right now, that they're offering the service. And that really makes my heart sing. That was my vision of that, having an FFL, that voluntary firearm storage would be ubiquitous with doing business in the firearms community. That it's like, hey, you're a gun shop, you are my hub, you're my resource, and you're someone who can store firearms. So it's really exciting to see that vision as a pioneer coming to fruition. And really our next the next thing that we're working on, especially as the word gets out and different legislators are like, okay, well, this is a solution that our constituents really like. How can we make sure that it becomes more accessible to people in our state? And so we've been having wonderful educational conversations with legislators. Thank you very much for asking about this and opting to make this solution more viable and choosing to promote this over things like extreme risk protection orders. Here are some ways that you can help to reduce liability and to protect the privacy of gun owners and reduce hesitation in your state. And so recently in Ohio, Senate Bill 273 it's a perfect example of that. There was legislation that a senator put forth reducing liability to FFLs, and yet there was a section in there that asked for the Attorney General to be the one that created that storage contract. And so some of my friends at Women for Gun Rights, they said, hey, Sarah, here's a bill about voluntary firearm storage. Can you call this senator and explain how some of this wording in here can actually create hesitation for use for voluntary firearm storage and barriers for people to using the service? And I was so grateful because that senator listened to me, and he took out the section that required the Attorney General was the one that was the keeper of that storage form, which, you and I care about rights, right? And so we don't want to create an unintentional registry or extra caveats for information, data collected that we don't want that, they want to protect privacy. And in addition, he added privacy protection measures to that bill. So it reduces liability to FFLs and helps to preserve privacy for gun owners. And I think as the work of our mission continues, that really is kind of the next big thing that we're focusing on, is educating the public and legislators. Here's a way that you can help to promote this and increase access to voluntary firearm storage.
Well, once again, Sarah, thank you so much for everything that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is once again the holdmyguns.org, holdmyguns.org. Once again, if you know somebody in crisis, give them that website. If you know an FFL, give them that website and tell them they need to get plugged in. We need to see on the map of FFLs that are available. We need to see it all over the United States so that people can feel safe. And be able to deal with when they're dealing with challenges and be able to make a good decision and be able to make them and those around them safe. So once again, Sarah, thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you, Craig.
All right, folks, once again, this is Craig DeLuz with 2A News. Once again, 2A News with Craig DeLuz, coming to you from the Imperium Strategic Group mobile studios at SHOT Show 2026. We'll be back with more fun interviews. sometime today, I'm assuming. Anyway, y'all take care. Have fun.